Hello there, I am Man in Yellow and welcome to another high-ranked game review video. In this one we will be looking at a game between EdsynousPrim and hopeloy. I'm just going to call them Prim and hopeloy. And the reason why I chose this game is because there are a lot of different things here that are very interesting. You get to see some halfies in here which work pretty well on this map. I will explain why later. We have the usual Inoculus, which is very common, especially on this map. We have a very good Kaboom combo, and we also have hopeloy in here, who is, for anyone who doesn't know, the biggest whale in the game easily. Some people call him a megalodon. He spent a lot of money on this game. Everything is level 30 as far as I know. There's probably a few level 28s or like 29s of the newer Phobies, but they are pretty much maxed out on pretty much everything that they can max out without spending like way more money on the game, I would guess. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if everything is just level 30 on their account right now, because they've spent that much money. So I think it's a pretty interesting game, and there are some interesting things that will happen in it. Also, this is on the floor is lava. I don't think I mentioned the map name in the beginning. Here we get a pretty common opener. We get 2 1-keys. This is very common on small maps in general, but very common on this map also. I would say the only more common thing on this map is probably Unicorn with a 1-key, but this is probably a better opener, to be honest. This is what you see a lot of high-ranked players do. They go double 1-key into an Inoculus. That is extremely common on this map, and for good reason, because it is very good. Getting an Inoculus out early is just great. It helps cover a lot of space. And you'll also see that on the following turns where I talk a bit more about it. So it works out pretty well. You'll also notice that they went for a cowbell and a contortion, so one high damage one and one tanky one. That makes a lot of sense. Some people would say that you should go for tickles and cowbell instead, because people like very tanky 1-keys early on for holding points. But it makes some sense here to also have a high damage one, because you can just kind of use that damage a little bit maybe if you want to. So there's arguments for both, like using high power 1-keys and tanky 1-keys. Also, another opener that you sometimes see, or used to see a decent amount, is Gravedigger breaking this block on turn 1. That has kind of gone out of favor, because that was mostly done like early on in the game's lifespan when people didn't really understand tempo that well, because you can kind of hard rush here if people like go very slow in the beginning. But it is still something that is a viable option, because it gives you like a lot more flexibility in how you move your phobies around. It makes it easier to go up here and defend and stuff like that. So it's like a defensive option, I guess you could try if you want to. If it probably works really well at low rank still to do the Gravedigger thing, because like people don't understand tempo down there. So still a viable option. And then we also see hopeloy do pretty much the exact same thing. They bring in a lot of 1-keys. They bring in 3 as a matter of fact. And the reason why they're bringing in 3 is just to have a stat advantage here. They would already kind of have that because they are obviously over-leveled. I think they are 10 levels above, right? Yeah, I think Prim is mostly level 20s, and this is obviously just level 30s. You can see like how ridiculous these stats are. There's a pretty big difference with 10 levels. I believe it's 30% difference. But they are bringing in an extra 1-key, and that is just to have even higher of a stat advantage. This is a thing a lot of over-level players will do, where they will bring a lot of 1-keys and 2-keys. That is because those phobies have very good stats, so you can kind of just overwhelm the opponent with numbers to a certain degree, which is pretty good. That is obviously a very, like, not cheat, but it feels like cheating when you do it. Like whenever you match into a lower level player, you can try and do this where you just bring a lot of 1-keys and 2-keys and high stat phobies. It becomes very hard for them to play the game most of the time. So that is a very normal thing to do, because if you end up in like a skirmish or a fight, the player with the higher stats is mostly going to come out on top of that most of the time. And if you are both over leveled and you brought more of these low cost high stat phobies, that makes it very easy to win those fights if they happen. Of course, the lower level player will not allow those fights to happen most of the time, but you can kind of gain an advantage from doing that kind of thing. Now we just see the Inoculus, which is entirely expected. That is a smart choice to do here. We see the Cowbell move down here just to put some pressure on hopeloy, which is a correct choice. If you are underleveled, you pretty much have to put pressure on the opponent, because if you're just playing for stats, like I said before, you're probably going to lose. So if you don't pressure your opponent and force them into awkward plays, it's going to be pretty hard to win against someone who's overleveled most of the time. Either you win by hard rush, or you win by them having to make some bad plays due to like being behind on the board. That's usually how you beat a higher level player, or just by them being bad, which also happens some amount of the time. Contortio obviously takes a point on the other side of the map here. That way they have 4 points to their 2 points, so they're dealing a decent amount of damage every turn. We will also see that the Inoculus just sits right here instead of moving. The reason why they're sitting here instead of moving forward to here is because otherwise the Contortio would move forward here and it would attack the Inoculus, and you would essentially just be taking free damage, because this Contortio is probably going to go here anyway. So like, why let them hit your Inoculus for free? And like, that is also something that you want to look out for a lot. You don't want to let the opponent just hit your units for free, because that is obviously very bad for you. Like, there's no reason to take free damage, and that can very often happen with 1 keys. If you have your Phobies sit next to a panic point, the opponent will take their 1 key, walk up to the panic point and hit you, and they will both have taken a panic point, which is often worth around 1 key. Depending on the game state, it can be worth more or less, like whether you can defend it and whether you are behind or ahead and so on. But it's usually worth around 1 key, and if they then get free damage, they are already like kind of up in value on their 1 key, so they are very happy about life at that point. So they will always do that if they can, which is why Prim is putting the Inoculus back here. In addition to that, it can still reach both of the points here that you are trying to defend, and it can also still defend this Contortio here, because if hopeloy puts his Razormouth in here or here or here, whatever, if they put it near the Contortio to fight it, you can just Grave Digger and break this wall, and you can kill the Razormouth very easily, and you could probably even recap this point if you wanted, or steal that point from the opponent if you wanted with the Contortio then, to push yourself further ahead. So it defends all of your panic points right now, except this one in the corner, I guess, but that's kind of not your point. That's kind of hopeloy's point, I guess you could say, because it's like far in on their side of the map. So that is like a very good phobie here, obviously, because it covers everything and keeps the opponent away from your side. Also, this like Cowbell down here is great, because it's not only pushing tempo by like, you know, getting panic points and dealing damage to the heart and stuff, but it also forces hopeloy's Cowbell to go down here and fight it, which is great, because then this can't be anywhere else on the map. So it's not taking this point probably, and you kind of like get a lot of room to move around because of that. So it makes a lot of sense to do that. This is something you see very commonly on that map. Like, people will double 1 key here and then they will put a tanky 1 key down here. Usually it's Tickles, can also be Cowbell, but they very often go down here on this point. You should never do it with a Dimensional, by the way. Don't ever put Bachelor down here, because then they take back the panic point faster. The great thing about this is that if you have a tanky 1 key down here, often the opponent will have to move up, hit it, then next turn they will have to double hit it. So you get to have the point for 2 turns and keep a phobie busy for that long, while doing something else on the other side of the map, which is very nice. So that is a very, very common thing to do on this map as player 1. You go double 1 key and then Inoculus, and you move them exactly this way. There's some variation in which 1 keys you use, but it still happens very often. Now here, hopeloy is taking back the panic point here, and as you can see, they obviously moved a phobie here. It wasn't a Contortio, but they still put a phobie there. If the Inoculus was sitting here, they would almost certainly have put the Contortio over here and hit the Inoculus, and that would have been bad for you. So it's a good thing that they didn't do that. I would say that hopeloy is making a pretty big mistake here personally, because they are not putting their Contortio on this point. Now, the reason why they should be doing that is because you want to do what I kind of choose to call overloading the opponent. I'm not sure if there's a better word for it or if there's some better explanation for it, but you want to essentially like put too many things forward for the opponent to do. Like you want to give them too much to deal with in one turn instead of letting them slowly deal with one thing at a time. So currently what the board looks like right now is this Inoculus will double hit this Razormouth, the Contortio will go up here, the Cowbell will hit here twice. So currently Prim has no Phobies that will be hitting this thing, because the other Phobies are occupied with other things. So if this thing just walks over here, the Contortio walks over here and takes this point, Prim has to deal with that somehow. The only way they can deal with that is by putting a 1 key here on the lava and bringing something like a corn here and hitting it, which is a pretty awkward turn, because then you suddenly have a lot of panic points here. You're about to get another panic point down here. Well, you wouldn't have this anymore because there would be a Contortio on it, but you're forcing their play there. Like they will not be able to bank, they will not be able to go for anything else. I just think it's a lot better and they would kind of push their advantage that way. But instead they keep this back here, so this Contortio is just doing nothing on this turn. And this will still die just the same. They will take this point just the same. It's way less annoying for Prim to deal with. It gives them way more options in what they want to do. They can go Gravedigger here, they could go for their own Stabby. They could go for whatever they want, pretty much. They could bank. There are so many options that they can do now, instead of being forced to put a 1 key on lava and all kinds of other annoying stuff. So I definitely think they should have done that. And not only do I think they should have done that, I think they should probably have put like a Bachelor or some other 1 key behind it. Because then when the 1 key hits your Contortio, you can walk up here on the point and kill it. And you can just kind of push your tempo further and further forward. Could maybe even bring double 1 keys or 1 key with a corn, 1 key with a Sucky or a half key maybe. And that would be very good for pushing your advantage on this map if you were doing that. But instead they're just keeping the Contortio there, which I think is a pretty big mistake at this point in the game. Also, this Stabby is ridiculous. Look at these numbers. 2.7k health and 700 attack. That is ridiculous. It's a very scary Phobie right there. Stabby scales really well with high levels. Or with having high levels. And now, instead of being forced to the corn thing, they can bring a half-he over here. And what's so great about this half-he is that hopeloy can't really hit this thing. Like, if they walk forward with the Stabby here and hit it, they're going to be taking 1,000,000 damage from it. Their Stabby would probably even die. I haven't actually done the numbers on that. But let's see, like, they would take... How much would this be? 750? 500 more on top on that? And then 650 here. And then they would be hit with a snowball, most likely. Like, this would not be in great shape if they went up and hit this halfie. So that's why this Phobie is kind of great in this kind of space, because you can't really bully it in any way. Halfie in general is good in like 2 different situations. It's good when you really need something tanky for low cost that you can put in front of a Phobie. Like if you need to defend one Phobie from a push by the opponent. Or it's really good on some maps where there's too little space to like form a big group of attackers. What I mean by that is, currently you can see there's just a Stabby here. Maybe there could be one more Phobie behind it that could hit it. Maybe a 1 key or something. But it's very hard for hopeloy to walk in here and actually kill this halfie. And halfie is a Phobie that you always want to kill in 1 turn if it's possible. Because otherwise it's gaining this huge damage boost. And then it's essentially like a 2 or not a 2, like a 3 key or maybe even a 4 key in terms of value. And you don't want to let the opponent have that. So this Phobie always needs to be either one shot or just left alone until you are like ready to kill it in 1 turn, or you are so far ahead that you don't care about the damage. Because if you let this be like a 2k health, 750 attack Phobie for 2 keys, that is obviously ridiculous. That's essentially K9000 on mega steroids. That would be a very, very strong Phobie, or even 3 keys it would be very strong, I think. So you don't want to let them get that for free. Which means this is kind of just free to stand here without being in any danger of being attacked. Which is very nice. And it can also be used to like block later in the game and stuff like that. So this definitely makes a lot of sense. I think this is one of the good maps for Hafi. I also think the carousel is actually pretty good for a Hafi, because it can kind of take the bottom point and sometimes even the top point for pretty much free during the earlier stages of the game, which is very nice, especially if you put a shovel near it. Then it gets very, very easy to take points for free with it early on maps like that. Anywhere where it's hard for the opponent to like form a group of attackers, it can be very nice. I believe we also see hopeloy go for a Hafi later in this game, which tells you something about how good it is on this map. It's not necessarily like overpowered on this map or anything, but it's just pretty nice. Here we see the Gravedigger play. This is still very nice. Gravedigger is just great on this map because there's a lot of like good things. Like first of all, breaking that block here is just super good. Makes it way easier to move around and have like a team that can actually form. Kind of like I talked about before, it's hard to form a team, but breaking some of these blocks makes it way easier on this map. And then it also has several other things that can be great for it. You can walk over here and put a block. You could even stand here and then you could put a block here to block the opponent out of this side of the map, which would force them to Gravedigger this block to interact with you, because otherwise you would just like be wailing on their heart for free. You obviously don't want to let your opponent do that, so that you would force them to Gravedigger with your own Gravedigger, which is pretty nice. Like there's a decent amount of good things you can do with it. You can also break this block, which we will see later in this game, to make some plays and stuff like that. There's a lot of good things for it. Can even be used to defend your own heart by like placing a block in front and stuff. So overall a very nice phobia on this map also. Used a bit less than it used to be, but it's still pretty good. Here we just see hopeloy take their damaged cowbell that captured this point before and put it in here. That makes sense because it's a damaged cowbell. You may as well take a point with it. Force the opponent to like interact in some kind of way. And then we see them bring Billy, which is a phobia that you will see in many high rank games, if not all of them pretty much, because this phobia is broken, so that's no surprise at all. It's also very broken at level 30. Look at this thing. Pretty much 3000 health, 3 actions, that much damage. It's ridiculous. Very powerful. So that makes a lot of sense. And they can also do some poke action with it and stuff like that. And we just see the cowbell, or not the cowbell, the contortio recapture after the cowbell is dead. And we also see a bachelor go in here, and this is a very good spot for a 1 key extra, and it's a very good spot for bachelor in my opinion. The reason for that is because hopeloy is forced to kill this contortio, obviously. He wants to kill the contortio and put his own contortio there. That is the obvious play here. But if he's killing the contortio with a bunch of hits from this, and then placing his own contortio there, that means the stabby has to kill this bachelor. And if the stabby has to kill that bachelor, first of all, it's taking damage, which it doesn't want to do for free, obviously. Like, they took back a point and you are dealing damage. That's just great, like I talked about before. But it also pulls it closer in here, which means, in theory, it could get poked by this. There could be a large phobia walking up to it and hitting it next turn, or just standing next to it to really put some pressure on. Like, Prim could, in theory, go Quagmire and put it next to it, while walking up and hitting it next turn, just to really pressure it, or something like that. So that is a very annoying play, and you're kind of forcing your opponent to make like the play that you are, like you are dictating what the opponent will be doing at that point. We will obviously also see hopeloy go for an Inoculus here. That is what's gonna happen when an opponent has 4 keys on this map. There's always going to be an Inoculus pretty much. The only other thing I see sometimes are like some 4 key tech units, or like a 2 key so that you can bang into a 5, which sometimes happens, but not very often. So you pretty much always see Inoculus if they have 4 keys here. hopeloy also moves his Billy over. There are 2 reasons for moving the Billy over here. First of all, you need space for the Inoculus. That's kind of part of the reason. But also this Billy really needs to be here, because then if Prim puts something on this point, you can hit it 3 times. Which is obviously a very large amount of damage. So it prevents the opponent from punishing this stabby, which makes a lot of sense. And here we see the game-winning play. This is a very, 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 very good combo. Shovel and a Kaboom. Kaboom in general is really good with any phobie that can move it and maybe even move enemies closer. So it works really well with a Kara, Phantom and the Shovel. Those are like namely the big ones. Can also work with a Tractor, but usually you want even more support. The Shovel is essentially like a smaller Phantom in most cases. That's kind of what it does. It's like more general use, lower cost, lower power Phantom. That's pretty much what the Shovel is in most cases. But it's more general use because most of the time you don't really need Phantom's ability for some phobies. Like, it's kind of overkill in some cases. So just using this cheap, fairly well statted unit is better. And it works really well with Kaboom because giving Kaboom extra range is ridiculously good. Like the one weakness, or well, I guess it has two weaknesses, but the biggest weakness of Kaboom is that it is hard to connect it with enemies because you need to walk forward and then blow up. You only essentially have one movement or one like movement action because you need to blow it up on some turn. So it can walk forward and it can bomb up. But if you either shove it or use Phantom to teleport it or move it with Akira or whatever, it's gaining more movement for free essentially. Not for free, you're paying for it obviously, but like it gets more movement than it should have, and that allows you to like connect this very, very big ability. And if this connects with a couple phobies, you are probably winning that game because this is a ridiculous amount of damage, like 2.3k pretty much here. That is going to blow up most things very, very easily. Even if the opponent is over leveled, a Kaboom can absolutely win games on its own as long as it connects with like multiple phobies. So this is a very, very scary combo. Also, another interesting thing about this turn, we saw them kill the Contortio here with the Inoculus, and they just keep the Halfie in front. The reason for this is because hopeloy pretty much can't punish this Halfie. If they start hitting it with their Inoculus, they have to back all of their phobies off. They can only hit it once and then they have to back everything off from this point, and they have to just give up on holding control over the map, which they really don't want to do. So that means they pretty much can't hit this thing. It just gets to stay here and protect this point and protect the Inoculus for completely free, which is a very good like use of the Halfie ability, because otherwise they would obviously power up the Halfie, it will walk over here, take a point, it will get to hit something for a ton of damage. You don't want to let that happen. That is like game over material. So it defends very easily here. Also, some of you will probably already have noticed that Prim is setting up a very powerful play here. They have the Gravedigger ability up next turn, so they can break this block, move the Kaboom here, push the Kaboom, and it will nuke these two phobies. hopeloy doesn't see this, spoiler alert, so they end up getting hit by the bomb. And we get to see how powerful that can be. And if I remember correctly from just watching this replay earlier, I actually think Prim does the combo wrong, but it's still incredibly powerful, so it doesn't really matter as long as you are hitting multiple phobies with a Kaboom. You should be pretty happy. But yeah, they do it slightly wrong here. I'll explain why after when we've seen it all. Also, I just love that bomb. Kaboom is such a good phobie when it explodes. Literally like have sparkles over the entire map because it's just exploding everything. Very, very nice animation on a nuke like that. Okay, so you got to see the full play there. Obviously, from just the turn before, hopeloy should not have put this Billy back here after poking. They should have moved here, poked, moved the Billy back here. That is what should have happened, let's be honest. Like that just makes more sense, and they should probably have moved the stabby over here while still doing that. That would have made a lot more sense most of the time, because then you would be too far away for the Kaboom to get 2 hits. It would only be able to explode the stabby, which is a 3 for 3 key trait, so you're probably not unhappy about that. Not too unhappy at least. might still be like slightly unhappy, but it's not as bad as what happened there. Now the second thing is why this combo was wrong. And the reason for that is because Hafi ends up taking 700 damage from killing this Stabby. You could have killed it with a Kaboom. This is something you generally speaking want to look for when you are comboing with Kaboom. You want to try and kill dimensional Phobies with the bomb. The same thing is true for the normal boom and even Kerbloom. Kerbloom is pretty uncommon, but the normal boom is pretty commonly used. It's a very good zoning Phobie, and the normal boom is the 1-key boom for anyone who can't remember that. But you always want to look for ways where you can use them to kill dimensionals when you are playing those Phobies, because they sacrifice themselves, so they are not taking this extra damage. Like this on-death damage on the dimensionals. If you are killing a dimensional with a Kaboom, it doesn't matter that it's going to take 700 damage from the Stabby's on-death ability, because the Kaboom is already dead, so who cares, right? So if instead they had, like we see them go Snowball here, I believe, if I remember correctly. We can just quickly forward here. Yeah, they go Snowball, so instead of using the Snowball ability to fire on the Billy here, what they could have actually just done instead is they could just have used a normal attack from the Snowball on the Stabby, and then they could have used the Happy to hit the Billy, and that would have killed it. And they would have killed all of them. They wouldn't have taken 700 damage on this thing for no reason, and the Snowball ability would still be up, which is a very big deal. Having Snowball's ability up versus not having Snowball's ability up is a huge deal in this game. Like, that is the difference between Snowball essentially being a mobile 1-key and it being a very, very powerful 3-key. Snowball is like a Phobie that changes between having power turns and powerless turns, I guess you could say. Like, when it has its ability, it's super strong. It's very mobile, high range, high damage. The fire can be used to kill dimensionals. It's overall just great. When it doesn't have the ability up, it's trash. Like, that's a 1-key or 2-key, really. Except that it has very high movement, right? But in terms of stats and damage potential, it's essentially a 1-key or 2-key. And if you kept the fire, or the fireball, I think it's called shish kebab, yeah. If you kept that on the Snowball, you would be threatening this Inoculus so much more right now. Like, that would actually be kind of dangerous for it. Not necessarily super dangerous, but it would look somewhat dangerous, because it could run in here and hit you. And it would also be way more dangerous for the other Phobies that hopeloy might summon. Like, you put a Phobie out here, suddenly you're getting fireballed and hit and they back off. And you've just taken a ton of extra damage, instead of this just being able to maybe run around a little bit. So I definitely think that was a pretty big mistake here. You took 3 damage, you used a very important cooldown when you didn't really need to. So those aren't great. Also, they could have actually put this Gravedigger out of the Inoculus range if they really wanted to. The problem with that is maybe that leaves your Inoculus a little bit too exposed. I'm not sure if there's some way where they can kill it. I don't think there is, but maybe I'm wrong. Like, maybe they could go Jar Cannon, Snowball, and a hit with the Inoculus, and that's enough. That's probably enough to kill the Inoculus. I'm not sure. Kind of, the numbers are a bit out of the way here, because these are level 30s, so a Jar Cannon suddenly does 400 damage instead of like 300. So they could probably kill this if you didn't have the Gravedigger in front. But what I'm just trying to say is, like, you maybe could have done a bit better here. I think if you really, like, did the turn perfectly, you could probably have set this up in a way where you end up with this kind of setup. Inoculus is here. Gravedigger is here. Your Hafi is here. And your Snowball is here with its ability up, and you can hold the Le Shovel here if you maybe wanted to, or here if you want to, kind of whatever. And you could maybe also put the Hafi here if you're fine with it taking 700 damage, just to be completely out of range from this. What that would require is, actually the shovel couldn't be there, because what that would require would be the shovel going back here instead and pushing the Kaboom in that way. I can just show it actually, that's probably easier if I just draw it on the turn from before. Why won't this drawing tool stop being active? Let me just go and turn back here. So what they could do is they could bring the shovel back here. They could bring the Gravedigger down here. Break this block. They shove on the boom. The boom ends up being right here on this spot. Then it walks forward. It's ready to blow up. You summon the snowball over here. You hit the stabby with the snowball. You blow up the boom. This is dead. Your Inoculus ends up standing on fire. That's not happy, but that's probably fine. You hit the Billy, and you hit the Billy with the Huffy here, and the Billy is dead. And you've killed both of these Phobies, and you are in a position where the Inoculus can only hit your Huffy, which hasn't taken damage yet. So to kill that, they have to bring fairly high amount of damage dealers. And your Phobies are in a position where it's pretty easy for you to like go on a counter offensive if they do that. In addition to that, that would save the Gravedigger from dying. It will stand on a lava tile that is way less vulnerable. So there could be a slightly better play here, which would probably have put Prim in an even better position. But again, you are nuking a 3 key and a 6 key and one of the best 6 keys in the game. Phobia that should arguably probably be a 7 or an 8 key with just a 3 key. So you are very happy about this play still. But it could have been even better if you like had infinite time to think about it. Which I can't remember if this is a async or a arena game. But I'm just trying to explain. You could maybe have done slightly better by staying out of the opponent's damage zone. And here we again see another Huffy. Like I've said before, this Phobia is very, very good. It's very, very good here also because you can't really kill it. I mean, you probably could if you commit everything, but like 2,600 health. You hit it twice with this, like it still has a lot of health left. There's 1,200 left. So the shovel would have to stand on lava and hit it. Both of these would need to walk up and hit it, and then you would need a jar cannon. That is not worth it just to kill this thing, let's be honest. Like that thing is completely safe and it can just stand there and hold the point to prevent the opponent from going more aggressive. So this is a very good Huffy also. We also see a Radiator here on top. This is probably the most common, or at least up there with like melee Phobie fighters. This is a very, very, very strong one. The only reason why it's not seen everywhere is because it's an ultra rare. The ability on this Phobie is just super powerful, and the AoE attack is also very nice. Being able to get a double hit in with a melee Phobie is basically the dream, because that means you can walk forward, hit once, and it hits once more at the end of the turn, and you're getting 2 hits. That's the biggest problem with most melee Phobies. You often only get 1 hit in a turn, but with this one that isn't the case as long as you're playing around the cooldown. So Radiator is a very, very used melee Phobie. It's very strong. And especially if you buff it and like put it into the middle of the enemy team and get 2 hits. Like I've actually seen people before use the Radiator with Phantom. That's how good that combo can be. So this is a very strong Phobie. I'm surprised they didn't make it level 30 because there is the pay to win option now where you can upgrade Phobies that way. But maybe they just don't want to spend more coffee on that kind of thing. It's also very strong here because it obviously threatens this Inoculus really, really well. Because this is a like over-leveled Radiator. Actually, I can't remember Radiator's base damage. Let me just check what that is. But the thing is, this can one-hit a Inoculus when it has the ability. It walks up to it, it hits it once, and then the passive goes off and it kills it. So that is very, very, very strong and a very good threat. Okay, it wouldn't kill on even level, it's 375. So that is because it's over leveled that you can actually do that. Normally you couldn't do that if you are even levels. But it's a very good threat here because it can kill this in 1 turn, which is very, very scary. You also gotta play around your levels, obviously. Here we see that they are taking this point down here. Oh, it didn't stop. Let me just stop this. This drawing tool is so annoying. It doesn't stop when I tell it to stop. I just go back here. What they did here is they are bringing this Huffy in here, and that is to put pressure on the enemy hard because now you are up 2 panic points. So they are slowly taking damage, and that means that they are forced to go in here and fight you. In addition to that, they also brought all of their Phobies in here in a cluster, which makes it way easier to like defend against an offensive push, because all of your Phobies are together, so they will be able to help each other or whatever. And that makes a lot of sense. Personally, I think this Electrocat is a bad choice here, because it's not quite tanky enough, which means that your Inoculus is in pretty big danger. They probably didn't expect this jar cannon that is going to come out, which is just very high attack power, so it ends up being able to kill this very easily, but, you know, I think this should have been a slightly higher health phobie. I could see a K9000 or something like that being a good phobie here, or any other, like, somewhat tanky thing would be nice. If they had another Hafi, that would also be nice, but they have already used that. But my point is just, I think they needed something with a bit more health here. That's easy to say in retrospect though, because I know what happens next. But you should definitely be scared when there is a overleveled radiator near your Inoculus. That is not something that you can just like ignore, because that will one-hit it if it's overleveled. Won't one-hit on even level though. But even if it was even level, there's a Hafi here that could walk in and hit you, so you still had to be scared. So I would say you should have put something a bit stronger in front. Also, they definitely missed a little bit of damage here. They could have hit the snowball instead, but that's a small detail. Here you get to see the power of this radiator, because at the end of the turn the ability triggers and now it kills, which is very, very powerful. It of course ends up dying instantly because it's very close to the enemy vault. How much health does it have actually? Yeah, it's just barely able to die to the... what's it called again? Wiki? Yeah, Wiki. Wiki just barely kills it here. But again, if there was a K9000, they couldn't actually do this, I don't think. So that would have been a better choice. You also see a pretty cute push play here, because this would normally be pushed down, I believe, so they moved the snowball over, if I remember correctly. Okay, no, it just moves up. I can't remember the push direction thing. I will never remember that. I don't play the game enough. Either way though, they killed the jar cannon with the push, which is pretty cute and very nice. And it's very good because they get to take this point at the same time while reducing the amount of phobies that hopeloy has. So now there is a very large amount of pressure on this heart. You might think this is still 3000 health. It's pretty healthy, but they are going to die very fast if they only have one panic point in here. Like, that is a very, very fast death. And on top of that, if you use the Inoculus to kill the snowball, that means your Inoculus is going to die instantly to this wiki and they will just reclaim the point. So you can't really do that, or they will take this point if you move the Hafi up there, right? So you can't really do that either, which means these points are just safe for you right now, pretty much. What hopeloy is forced to do is hit this once and then maybe hit this once and then take a point, which isn't very good, because then the shovel will just go here and start hitting the heart, which is also what we will see here. And it ends up with hopeloy dying to the heart rush. And they were pretty much forced to do this play. There was nothing else they could do. And this is essentially checkmate. And here they're actually forced to put this in front and also, you know, hit this. But they will just die here on the next turn. They could have maybe extended the game if they took a panic point, I think. But then this would either just double hit the heart, or, I mean, it wouldn't because then it would die. But if they actually managed to extend the game, it would just walk up and kill the Inoculus, and then it would go on the heart because this can't deal damage to it. So it would always end in a loss here, is what I'm trying to say. I can't remember if they have enough health that the double hit wouldn't have killed them if they took no damage there and then less here. Let's see. This had 470 more and wasn't taking... Yeah, they could have extended the game by 1 or 2 turns if they took a panic point, but they would have still lost. So, pretty impressive here. I think both players could have done slightly better, and it would maybe have changed the game. I think Prim could have pushed further ahead by like doing that one big turn differently, slightly differently, in a way where they would like be harder for the Inoculus to hit, and they would take a bit less damage, keep the snowball ability and stuff. That would have allowed them to push further a little bit faster. Like they would have been able to overwhelm hopeloy a little bit faster and actually kill the heart faster if they went for that option, or they could maybe even have won through phobie combat. And hopeloy could definitely have done better during some of the earlier stages, in my opinion, and they obviously shouldn't have let the bomb happen. That was like the big play that made this game turn out the way that it did. Like the Billy should not have died to that kaboom, should have been one tile further back. Either way, a pretty interesting game in my opinion. It showed off several things, such as like kaboom or just a normal boom being very good with the shovel. The shovel is just a great phobie. It showed off the Inoculus is still being very, very strong on all small maps because they get to cover so many points. We got to see some half-heat action from both players, which is very interesting. And we got to see a Billy die, which is very nice. I really enjoy that. Anyways, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye. And thanks for watching.